We've agreed. You're no longer part of the family. The message appeared without warning, flat and final, like a door slamming shut. No explanation. No argument. Just erasure. I stared at my phone, waiting for the three dots to appear. Waiting for her to correct herself. They never did. Seconds later, another notification flashed. My sister reacted to the message with a heart. That's when it hit me. I wasn't being punished. I was being deleted. I was sitting alone in the hospital break room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a half-cold coffee trembling in my hand. Around me, life moved on, monitors beeped, footsteps passed, someone laughed down the hall. But inside, something went very quiet. I realized the truth in that moment. I was an orphan with living parents. My chest tightened, but my hands didn't shake. In the ER, when a patient crashes, you don't panic. You don't ask why. You stop the bleeding first. So I opened my laptop. For years, I'd paid for the family cloud account. Photos, contacts, memories, every digital thread tying them together, because my father didn't trust online payments. I'd been 22 when I took over the bill. I never stopped. I logged in. Security settings first. I removed the recovery email. Replaced it with a burner address I'd created long ago and forgotten. Then I changed the password. The click was soft, but it sounded like a vault locking shut. They were still disowning me. They just didn't know yet that they'd lost access to everything. I leaned back in the plastic chair, its edge pressing into my spine. I waited for guilt to come rushing in because that's what I'd been trained to feel. It didn't. Instead, there was a strange calm. The kind that settles right before a storm. Because this wasn't revenge. This was triage. And I was done bleeding for people who kept cutting me open. I closed the laptop and reached for the next thread I'd been holding together. I didn't stop with the cloud. I went where the real pressure lived. The quiet systems. The things that only mattered when they suddenly stopped working. The insurance portal loaded slowly, the wheel spinning like it was thinking about whether to cooperate. This policy covered my father's prescriptions and my mother's specialty visits. Supplemental coverage. Non-essential until it wasn't. $300 a month. Automatically withdrawn from my account. I didn't cancel it. That would have been loud. Instead, I deleted my card from the payment methods and left the space empty. Then I checked the box for paperless billing. Changes saved. No email. No letter. No warning. Just silence. They wouldn't know today. Or tomorrow. Or even next week. They'd find out in about 6 weeks, standing at a pharmacy counter, confused, embarrassed, suddenly uninsured. I closed the tab and exhaled slowly. I should have felt cruel. Instead, I felt lighter. For years, I'd been the safety net. The quiet fix. The person who made sure the lights stayed on while they pretended everything was fine. I absorbed the stress so they didn't have to. I paid so they could posture. In the ER, you don't fight a hemorrhage with emotion. You apply a tourniquet and accept the numbness. I picked up my phone and opened my contacts. Mom. Dad. My sister. One by one, I blocked them. No goodbye message. No explanation. No defense. I didn't owe them closure. They'd already written the ending. The break room door swung open. Hey, Dr. Evans said, urgency in his voice. We've got a multi-car pileup coming in. 5 minutes out. I stood, smoothed my scrubs, clipped my badge back onto my chest. Muscle memory took over. Purpose snapped into place. I'm ready, I said. And for the first time in my life. I meant it. The next morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating nonstop. Missed calls. Voicemails. Notifications stacking on top of each other like a threat. 11 calls from my mother. 8 voicemails from my father. And 1 text from my sister. You're ruining everything. I sat on the edge of my bed, feet on the cold floor, and pressed play on the first voicemail. Anger poured out of the speaker. Accusations. Demands. Threats. I deleted it without finishing. Because suddenly, I remembered something important. They talked about everything they'd done for me. But I'd been keeping my own ledger. And it was overdue. That was when I finally let myself remember what I'd paid to stay in that family. The ledger had been sitting in my head for years. I just hadn't called it what it was. 3 years ago, my father called me in a panic. His voice shook in a way I'd never heard before. The bank was threatening foreclosure on the family house, the one they loved to call a legacy. 3 generations. Tradition. Pride. He said it was temporary. He said it was a misunderstanding. He said he'd pay me back. I emptied my savings. I worked double shifts for months, weekends bleeding into weekdays, feet aching, eyes burning. I wired them $42,000 to save a house my name was never on. They didn't thank me. Instead, my mother told the neighbors my father had made some smart investments to get through a rough patch. My contribution disappeared before the money even cleared. Then there was my sister. When she decided she wanted to reinvent herself, she needed equipment. A camera. Lighting. A website. Branding. She called it a career move. I called it $18,000 over 2 years, disguised as loans that were never mentioned again. But the worst entry in the ledger wasn't financial. It was the night I was 18. They sat me at the kitchen table like it was an intervention. My father didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just looked at me and said I wasn't college material. That I was average. That failing publicly would embarrass them. They didn't kick me out. They handed me a script. Tell people you're taking a gap year. Tell them you want to travel. Don't tell anyone we asked you to leave. I lied for them. I slept on a friend's couch. Worked 2 jobs. Put myself through nursing school while they told the world I was reckless and ungrateful. For 10 years, I'd been their safety net. Their bank. Their public relations department. I wasn't just their daughter. I was their biggest creditor. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared at the steam curling upward. The apartment was quiet. Clean. Mine. My phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was sharp with panic. I can't get into the cloud. All my photos are gone. Did you do something? I said nothing. She kept talking. Louder. Faster. Then came the real fear. The pharmacy says your father's insurance is inactive. I ended the call. 5 minutes later, a voicemail arrived from my father. His voice was calm, controlled, dangerous. And that's when I realized they weren't done escalating. They were about to threaten the only thing I had left. My father's voice filled the kitchen, low and deliberate. He said if I didn't fix everything by noon, he'd file a report. He said he'd tell the nursing board I was unstable, that I stole medication, that I shouldn't be trusted with patients. He wasn't just angry. He was aiming. In the ER, we call this escalation. When shouting turns into fists, you stop negotiating. You call security. So I didn't call him back. I called a lawyer. Or rather, my grandfather's lawyer. Mr. Sterling answered on the second ring, his voice steady in a way that made my chest tighten. Hannah, he said gently. I was just about to call you. Your grandfather passed away early this morning. The grief hit hard and fast. He was the only one who ever saw me. The only one who treated me like I mattered. The funeral would be private, Mr. Sterling said. But the will reading was scheduled for the next morning. 10 a.m. At the family house. They'd all been notified. That night, I didn't prepare to grieve. I prepared to perform. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and let my shoulders slump. I practiced avoiding eye contact. I pulled an old gray sweater from the back of my closet, 2 sizes too big, sleeves frayed at the cuffs. I needed to look fragile. In the ER, you don't fight a drunk patient head-on. You let them exhaust themselves. The next morning, the house smelled like polish and old money. Heavy drapes. Dark wood. A room designed to intimidate. They were already there. Perfectly dressed. Calm on the surface. My sister scrolling through her phone like this was an inconvenience. My mother smiled thinly. There's coffee in the kitchen if you want to make yourself useful. I sat down quietly. Mr. Sterling began reading the will. Property. Investments. Cash. The numbers stacked higher and higher, and I felt the room change. They weren't grieving. They were calculating. Then Mr. Sterling looked up. The entire estate, he said calmly, is left to my client's granddaughter. Me. Silence fell like a dropped plate. My father spoke first. He said it had to be a mistake. That his father wasn't in his right mind. Mr. Sterling disagreed. My mother laughed. She gestured toward me, toward my sweater, my posture. Said I couldn't manage something like that. I let my hands shake. I let my eyes fill. They thought they were winning. They had no idea the trap was already closed. While they judged me, I watched them. In the ER, you learn to spot desperation disguised as confidence. My father's watch ticked instead of sweeping. My mother's keys didn't belong to the car she claimed was hers. The designer labels were loud, but the panic underneath was louder. They weren't angry. They were broke. My father demanded guardianship of the estate, saying I wasn't capable. My mother offered to help by setting up a trust. An allowance. Supervision. I asked quiet, nervous questions. About taxes. About lawsuits. About responsibility. My father checked his watch again. He needed money fast. Mr. Sterling explained there was a legal shortcut, an emergency transfer of control, if they signed a waiver stating I was unfit to manage the inheritance. My father didn't hesitate. My mother followed. My sister signed last. They thought they were saving themselves. That's when I straightened. Mr. Sterling calmly invoked the competency clause in the will. Anyone who challenged the heir would immediately forfeit their inheritance. My father lost his bequest on the spot. The color drained from his face. That money had already been promised to someone else. I could see it in his eyes. They accused me of tricking them. I met his stare. It wasn't a trick, I said softly. It was a test. They begged. The clock was ticking. Foreclosure was minutes away. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I called the police. Weeks later, the house was gone. The cars followed. So did the status. I kept the property my grandfather loved. On my first night there, I found an old photo of myself tucked behind a vase, small, hopeful, forgotten. I threw it away. Not out of anger. Out of closure. Because revenge wasn't the point. Freedom was. If you're still waiting for people like that to change, stop. Don't hand them the keys to your life. Change the locks instead.